Thanks for joining us today. We have a really exciting guest who plays a pretty pivotal role in what I'm going to call one of the world's most influential brands. And I won't say more than that. I'll leave the conversation to fill in the blanks as to what I'm talking about there. So joining us today, we have David Downs, CEO of the New Zealand Story Group. Welcome.
Kia ora. I like being called the world's most influential brand. Not me, but what we represent. So.
And we'll dig into a little bit of that as we go through the conversation. I'm going to ask you a left field question because we've just come back with 2 weeks after Christmas.
I know.
What was the most Kiwi thing you did?
Oh, I went hiking in the backcountry of New Zealand. Excellent. And saw a bit of our own country. What was cool about it is seeing it through other people's eyes, because we were on a trip with lots of foreigners and tourists, and then suddenly they were reflecting to us what their image of New Zealand was. So it was super cool.
Some market research.
Yeah. It's probably tax deductible now that you mention it. I should do that.
What was it like watching that unfold, and what's the feedback that you're hearing there?
Yeah, I mean, New Zealand, this is part of our challenge and our opportunity. I'm sure we're going to talk about this. New Zealand's known globally for our beautiful mountains and lakes and rivers, and just for being this incredible, beautiful country. So we get that reflected to us a lot, and these tourists were coming in because they'd heard of this, and they were definitely experiencing it, and I was too. But at the same time, as someone who thinks about the brand of New Zealand, we don't just want to be known for that. there's much more to it. So it was really interesting. It was this sort of juxtaposition of, I'm glad you love our rivers or our waterfalls, but can I tell you a little bit more?
The pitch around the campfire.
Yeah. I didn't pitch too badly to anyone, but no, yeah.
Did you have anything stolen by the Kias?
Didn't see any Kia. Heard a few Kias. Didn't see any Kias, but there were lots of other wildlife around. It was great.
Very cool. All right, so tell us a little bit more about yourself and the New Zealand Story Group. We'll start with, who is David Downs? Take us through your journey.
So interesting. I've had an interesting career. I started my life as an actor and a writer.
Okay.
Well, not my life, but my professional life. And then I went into the technology sector and I set up my own businesses, and then I ended up working for Microsoft, big US corporate, did the corporate life for about 15 years. Then I came into the government sector in my 40s and worked for New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, which is very much related to New Zealand Story, the part of government that thinks about our international trade. And then I had a career break, or another career, where I got cancer, and I went off and spent a couple of years being a cancer patient, which was not a job I applied for. But then when I got back from that experience, I decided to change things up a bit. And then this opportunity at New Zealand Story arose, and I thought, this is cool. It brings together some of my early life, the creative storytelling, and then some of the international business stuff that I'd done in the past, and a love of New Zealand.
For the viewers at home who don't know, tell us about the New Zealand Story Group. What is the space that it fills? What does it set out to achieve?
Sure. So we are, first of all, we're a government-funded entity. So we are part of the kind of government system that thinks about New Zealand's international trade and reputation. Our particular piece of it is thinking about the brand of New Zealand as one of our most valuable assets. And you mentioned it in the intro. The brand of New Zealand is an incredibly important part of who we are and what we stand for. And we can't just kind of let that sit by itself. We have to kind of curate it and think about the stories that reinforce the things that we want to tell the world. So my team, there's about 20 of us in the team, look after that brand. We tell stories ourselves, so we create media and we do social media and that sort of thing. We teach people how to tell stories, so particularly with businesses, we do a lot of work trying to help them understand how the brand of New Zealand can come to life for them. And
something that we at Blue Ocean, we've been to a number of the workshops over the years.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, we were very much trained in open hearts, open minds, open spaces, although I know things have moved on.
They've moved on a little bit, but still in the same zone. And then the third thing we do is we say we whakamana, we build the mana and we create the mana of the brand, which is the least tangible bit, but one of the most important. That's things like trademark protection. We look after the trademark fern for New Zealand. And then we make sure that the brand, when people talk about New Zealand and who we are and what we stand for, that they're kind of on message.
So tell us a little bit about the impact of brand New Zealand, because I saw some stats from a presentation of yours a while back that absolutely floored me, just in terms of the impact.
Someone went to one of my presentations and remembered something.
I wasn't there. Louis sent me the PowerPoint. Sorry.
That'll do.
But read it, I did.
Yeah, well, the brand of New Zealand is, again, one of our most valuable assets. If we were a company, not a country, we'd have a balance sheet, and on our balance sheet would sit all our assets, like our rivers and lakes are an asset for the country. Our culture is an asset. The brand of New Zealand is worth about $280 billion US. There's about 450 million Kiwi. 1 billion Kiwi. That is a massive asset. And that's not us valuing it. That's an independent, company that does valuations of brands. So it sits there on our balance sheet as a country, if you like, as one of the most important things. And the reason is because the companies that come out of New Zealand, the organisations that come out of New Zealand, not just companies, they get the halo effect of that. New Zealand's brand is probably worth a premium of about 25%. So if you're selling a bottle of wine, a piece of meat, kiwi fruit, technology, the fact that you're from New Zealand gives you extra value.
I was going to ask what that increase looks like, because quantifying the value of a brand, I mean, it's hard to do. It's a hard.
Yeah. But it's a bit of a holy grail thing, actually, for those of us who are in my business of country promotion or trade promotion. But research has been done, again, not by us. It's this very credible third-party research that talks about the relationship between people's impression or respect for a country, and we measure that really diligently, quite regularly. The relationship between that and then their propensity or their willingness to invest in or move to or buy from or whatever. And there's a very strong correlation. So the more people respect a country, the more likely they are to want to invest or buy or whatever, and travel there. And then you can measure that as saying, well, what's the premium value? Because you can compare that with others. And as I say, it turns out that it's about 25%. So if you're trying to create value as a country, which we are, and our trade strategy has got to be about value creation, premiumization, being a kind of a tier one player, then the brand of not only your company, but the country that you come from is important. And so that's what we make sure that people realize, and when you take people through this logic, they really get it. Like they go, oh yeah, you're right. Traditionally in the food sector, food and beverage sector in particular, they get it from day one. But more and more we're now realising that value translates into other sectors like the technology sector, education sector, etc. So you can get that same value, that halo effect.
So our audience is primarily B2B marketers, and I think within that space, a lot of them are certainly going to come from the tech space. So like you said, the food and wine, applying the New Zealand brand as an augmenter, I suppose, to a product, that makes complete sense. But clean, green, what is the brand built on?
This is good. You're right in the heart of it now. This is good. Because this is the challenge that we have and the opportunity. As I say, I always think of these things as dual. Globally, our brand has been historically known for clean, green New Zealand. In fact, when we look at things like sustainability and New Zealand's credentials with climate, we get let's frankly say it, an undeserved reputation, because people have this impression of us. But what that misses, that part of our brand is just kind of one aspect. What that misses is the things that, again, other countries value about us that we ourselves might not even realise they value. Trustworthiness, ease of doing business, friendliness, openness, welcoming. These are parts of our brand that are as strong as this perceived sustainability piece.
Can I just dig in there, because you said an undeserved position for clean and green, and that's a spiky phrase. It's a tidbit that I can't leave that one alone. Why is it undeserved?
Well, I don't know if it's completely undeserved. I think it's tenuous, is the way I'd put it. When we think about the risks to brand New Zealand, for example, because again, brand is an asset, you have risks. So we think about that risk. We believe that the fact that we score always in the top 5 or 6 of every country. So there's lots of surveys done, and we often find ourselves in that top sort of 10 position. The fact that we're up there, it means that it carries a consumer expectation. It carries this feeling that we should be living up to being the greenest country in the world, having the most clean rivers, having the best environmental standards, etc. And the reality is when you measure that, we're actually in the middle of the pack. We're not at the top of the pack.
Right.
So there's a disjoint or this kind of disharmony between our perceived position and our actual position, and that's a risk, because even though we're doing things to improve, brands are damaged when they don't live up to their own kind of brand image, as many people know on this discussion. So that's the risk. It's not so much undeserved, but certainly we don't necessarily always have the credentials to back up the perceptions.
It's the one that's maybe one of the facets of the brand that needs the most I suppose broader involvement in order to be able to deliver.
Well, it's incredibly difficult. I mean, this is a country, there's 5 or 6 million of us that need to do actions that will make us live up to that brand, including the government. But it highlights the risk as well for the brand New Zealand, which is if we're only known in one dimension, then we're missing a bunch of value, but B, we're settling on some kind of risk. So that's what we're doing. We say in our strapline that we're trying to get New Zealand to be world famous for more than just natural beauty. So natural beauty is a part of it, but there are other things, as I said, our trustworthiness. And so go back to your point, B2B marketing, particularly in those sort of high-end, high-tech manufacturing, technology, etc. 10, 15 years ago, New Zealand businesses were out there actively buying .coms, actively getting PO boxes in Maryland, trying to pretend they were anything but a New Zealand company, learning a slight American accent. What we've now realised, and the good ones are really realising, is that actually being from New Zealand is an asset. Like, we've got exemplar tech companies. We've got this position in the world that says we're a really safe environment. COVID showed us that we can work from anywhere. So actually more and more now we're seeing technology companies going, actually it's an asset to be from New Zealand, and we are known for our trustworthiness and, as I say, ease of doing business, lack of corruption, ease of high transparency. These are massive assets. But New Zealanders don't always know that.
No. I mean, if you look at even something like Xero, which is a New Zealand success story, and I mean the tech sector in general, you look at actually how much it contributes to GDP and how almost unknown it is as being this big driver. And it's easy to kind of quantify the impact of the tangible stuff, food, dairy, everything else like that. But when it comes to the stuff that's a little bit less.
Well, those of us who work in the tech sector know that it's what a huge asset is, and it's the fastest growing sector. It's growing at double-digit growth, $17 billion impact, about $11 billion in export revenue. And that's just increasing in its capacity. Whereas in the primary sectors, which I also work in and I love, but you reach peak capacity. There's literally a physical constraint, and we might be nearly there, if not there already. So you've got to find value in other ways. So for me, the tech sector and things around it are a huge opportunity for our country. And it is a B2B space for us largely. There aren't many B2C type tech companies from New Zealand because we just can't scale the marketing spend. And being from a relatively small population country, we need to focus on niches that we can own.
Absolutely. And you see things like medtech, so they're starting to really, really build now.
Baggage handling systems, dartboard creators, random things.
What I love about B2B. I wouldn't have known that we had a world-class baggage handling system.
Two of them. We've got two of them.
That must be the market, right?
Well, it's just suddenly what happens is you get these clusters that develop, and then expertise in a niche happens, and then from that you get 2 or 3 spin-out companies. I mean, you look at Weta Workshop and Weta Digital and Park Road Post, and that kind of cluster that came out of Lord of the Rings. Who would have thought that would then create a breast screening expertise, because the image analysis that's involved in creating things for the film sector suddenly becomes really important in medtech, as you say.
So, I mean, what I take from that is just a lateral thinking, problem solving. What are the other facets that Brand New Zealand is built upon? You talk about trustworthiness. Like, what do we need to invest in?
I've led you so expertly into asking me that question.
I feel like I'm being primed.
You are absolutely fallen into my trap.
I took the bait.
Yeah, good. Well, no, because that's one of them. So New Zealanders think of ourselves as, and it's all in our popular culture, this whole number 8 wire thing. So we think of ourselves as innovative and entrepreneurial and etc. And we are. Good news and bad news. Good news is we are. Bad news is so is pretty much everyone else in the world. So you've got to be careful to say, hey, we are the Silicon Valley of the South Pacific, or we are, startup nation, because we're, frankly, when you compare yourself on those sorts of startup-y type stats, we're doing okay, but we're not. The difference for us is that our innovation and our kind of entrepreneurial spirit comes usually with this real deep connection to something else, which is the brand piece. So when we talk about the brand of New Zealand, we talk about our strap line, if you like. If we never put this on a poster or anything, but the way we describe it is that New Zealand is a place where care for people and connection to place is the thing that drives ingenuity. And so our ingenuity is with a purpose. And if you look through the finalists of the High Tech Awards, or the companies that are successful, that get government funding or whatever, you look at what they do, and it's typically because they are doing something with care for people in place. So that connection is really important to us. And then deeper than that, when we talk about the brand of New Zealand, because given we're brand people, and excuse me if I get a bit sort of brandy on this, but we talk about the brand values of New Zealand being 4 of them. One, and they're expressed in Te Reo, because we love the language, but also it's our language. but also it translates complex ideas in a very simple way,
Yeah.
which is perfect for a brand. So we talk about Manaaki,
Yep.
and Manaaki, is most people will know, is often thought of as being hospitality, but it's more than that. It's building the mana of others. It's welcoming people and seeing their mana. Tiaki, which is the Māori word or concept of intergenerational care for a place and being a guardian.
Yep.
And again, deep kind of indigenous knowledge. In the heart of it, we think of this concept of Pono, and Pono in Māori means trustworthiness, integrity, doing things right, doing things the correct way. Again, a deep word. And then the word that sits on top of it all, that we wrap it all around it, which is kind of capturing this, because all that's beautiful, but it misses a little bit of an element of danger and a little bit of New Zealand's kind of challenging of authority. And that word we call pōtikitanga. And in Māori, the word pōtiki literally means the youngest child. Like it literally, if you're the youngest in the child, you're called the pōtiki of the family. And so pōtikitanga means the spirit of the youngest child. And so that's how we wrap that in. And that's the youngest child is typically a little bit doing things differently than their brother and sister, challenging authority, sometimes a bit cheeky.
Yeah.
And we found that that's a really good way to describe our type of innovation. Rather than just saying we are innovative or we are the startup nation, we say actually we're a country of pōtiki, of the youngest thinking people.
That's a really interesting way of looking at it, actually. I really where did that come from?
Lots of workshops. We're good at workshops at New Zealand Story. Hell's bells. No, we did. We consulted on that one widely. We got lots of people's input, obviously Māori, but many startup, many businesses, innovators. And all of that came together, and we said we've got to find these ways of describing it without it being a massive book. It's got to be simple, and it's got to speak to people. And we've been sort of talking in this way for about a couple of years now, 2.5, 3 years, and it really resonates. Like New Zealand businesses, when they look at it, they go, I can see ourselves in that, yeah.
And that's when you know you're on the right track.
Yeah, that's when you know it's right. Because you're trying to brand an entire country and everything that comes from it is, virtually impossible. But getting it so that the elements are there.
Yeah.
And the whole design is that some things will be more one than the other, or they'll dial up or down.
Yeah.
If you're talking about New Zealand from a diplomacy point of view, they're gonna dial into this Pono and this trustworthiness, this caretaker guardianship. If you're talking to AJ Hackett or animation research, they're right in the pōtiki space of we're doing things differently. Yeah.
So how does a let's take an example here. Let's take just say a B2B tech firm exporting. We're talking to the guys from Kiwi SaaS later on. So let's talk software as a service. Good. How can a software as a service business or a B2B marketer in one use pōtikitanga to their advantage?
To me, I mean, business and branding is all about story, and B2B marketing is all about telling your story. And so you want to talk about the fact that New Zealand is the youngest country in the world, the last place to be inhabited by humans, that we sit on the edge of the world, and yet we have this perspective of the world that's different. Yeah. We are travellers. We're a nation of travellers. We're a nation of people who travelled to be here. Our ancestors are typically the second son or the youngest child, because the oldest child inherited all the stuff in England or in the Pacific Islands, and the youngest children had to move. So we've got this restless...
I love that origin piece. That's really interesting to hear that. Yeah.
I think New Zealand's origin story is fantastic. It's pretty much everyone had to travel to be here. And even and so we are the children of the generations of the people that did take the big journeys across the sea. My parents came here in the 1960s. That wasn't that long ago, but it was still a massive journey. You couldn't just go back home if you felt like it.
No, that was a phone call once a year if you were lucky kind of time.
Yeah. Telegram when I was born, and then no communication for another year or something, apparently. And so therefore it breeds this different way of thinking. And that when you go back to the marketing sense, then you're sort of talking about, well, how does our brand build on that? Well, we also realise we're the guardians of this incredible part of the planet that everyone seems to love. So we are the people who think about what we care for, who innovate because we care about the land around us.
I mean, myself, I'm from the UK originally. I've chosen to be here.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a mindset that still plays across the board. The only other nation that I can think of that feels as much of a sense of pride in its land and in its origin is Canada, definitely up there. And
They got a bit of land here.
They got a little bit.
Got a couple of mountains.
Most coastline of any country in the world. Eh?
Well, we're the 9th largest coastline in the world.
Oh, yeah.
I don't
Still
like
top,
I've got a few of those
10.
stats. Yeah. 9th largest of any country in the entire world is New Zealand. There you go.
What's
4th biggest sea territory of any country in the world.
4th biggest.
So we're a global. Everyone says we're small, and we're 5 million people. So population, or 6 million if you count our expats, of course. But our land area though is massive. And our sea territory is huge, one of the biggest in the world. So we actually have the 4th largest country in the world when you look at it, including the Blue Ocean. Given your name of your company, you should be.
Hit me with some other stats. I'm sure you've got hundreds of these.
Second highest per capita golf courses in the world.
Interesting.
There you go. Partly because we've got so much land.
What's number one? Is it Hawaii or Scotland?
No, Scotland.
Scotland.
Okay.
Yeah. That's just because they've got no people, right?
Well, yeah, they invented the sport, so I guess we'll let them have that one. We're a global superpower when it comes to seeds.
Seeds?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 50% of the world's carrot seeds are grown in New Zealand. If New Zealand was suddenly decided to stop exporting, 50% of the world's carrot supply would get cut off immediately.
And that's all out of Ruapehu, is it?
Oh, no, it's all out of just near Christchurch, just a little area south of Christchurch, Rakaia, just in that there's a little microclimate, apparently. Yeah. So we are a global superpower, yeah.
In carrot seeds?
In carrot seeds.
Who knew?
We are the world's 3rd longest continuous democracy.
Wow.
So it was the USA, 1770 something, it was Switzerland, and then New Zealand. But
we got late. We came to the party later than everyone else.
However, we were the first in the world to have that where women could vote, of course, as we all know. So the way I say it is, we actually invented democracy, because USA didn't let everyone vote until the 60s.
Yeah,
I won't talk too much about what the USA were doing in the 50s and 60s. And then Switzerland didn't let women have the vote till 1972.
Are you serious? Wow.
Yeah, completely right and crazy. So we invented democracy.
First there and longest running. That's what I take.
Exactly right. Yeah. So I think I have this little presentation I often do, which is about how New Zealanders often talk ourselves down. We say we're just a small country. We're not just a small country. We're bigger than England and Ireland from a geography point of view, and we are at the bottom of the world. But that's actually where you see things. You know, you have a perspective from where we sit. Yeah.
That your use of the word "just" is a really interesting phrase there, because we've talked to a number of different people, and people who work, again, SaaS and being overseas, selling overseas, selling to customers in the US, and what you often feel is this sense that we do ourselves a disservice by underappreciating what it is that we have here. And so how do we go about changing that?
We definitely have that. By way of example, I'll say a little anecdote. I still go on a lot of trade missions and things like that, and I spend quite a bit of my time helping New Zealand businesses, physically helping them in other countries, like going with them and stuff like that. And so you often see this, like how New Zealanders show up in another country, and we do show up as again, it's this duality of it's a challenge and an opportunity. We're humble, we're respectful, and we look up to others. But that shows up sometimes as being uncertain, insincere, worried. I was at an event once where we had purposefully got together a whole bunch of investors. This is in Silicon Valley. These are people who actively want to invest in technology companies, and we brought a bunch of New Zealand technology companies. So we're in the right room. Like, we've done our job. We've got everyone in the right room. There's 20 of them and 20 of them. And first job was us good public servants is go and get the Kiwis away from the bar and tell them to stop talking to each other and go and talk to those guys over there, because they're the ones you're here to talk to.
They're who we came to talk to.
And then I remember grabbing one of these New Zealand tech company guys, bringing him over to this investor that I knew was interested in his area. Like we were set up. And the tech guy, the American investor, because he's a big American guy, goes, "Okay, man, tell me about your technology." And the Kiwi guy goes, "Oh, yeah, it's all right. I mean, it's okay, nothing special." Which, to a Kiwi, we go, "Oh, look, he's a good humble Kiwi, he's a good bugger." Yeah. Whereas the American guy, you can just see the blood drain from his face and go, "What the hell am I doing here? Like, who is this turkey?"
Yeah.
So we're often teaching New Zealand businesses, they have to, if they find themselves at their maximum level of discomfort in terms of being arrogant, they're probably at the minimum level of what you need to be. Yeah, just find that little overlap. Talk yourself up. We are the best at this. We are amazing. We're great. And then you might get in. Yeah.
And does that, So there's a lot that I know that the New Zealand Story Group does and produces in terms of support, advocacy, communication.
Yep.
I mean, I mentioned it earlier on. We went to some of the workshops probably 4 years ago to learn that storyteller piece.
Cool.
What kind of how can we access this stuff? How can we leverage this stuff? How can more marketers get on board with?
And we hope you do. By the way, I mean, I describe us as having 6 kind of services that we offer.
Okay.
The biggest one, but it's also the hardest to get your head around, is this idea that we are the guardian of the brand of New Zealand. So everything I've talked about so far is us being like thinking about who we are as a country and how do we show up. Put that to one side, that's the most important. But the most tangible 5 things, the stuff that I can describe to my mother and she understands, is we have like a toolkit of imagery and graphics and videos and infographics and things, and you can download them, they're all free. You can use them in your own marketing. So smaller tech companies or smaller but companies of any type can blend in some imagery and stuff and look on brand, but also free. And did I mention free?
You did free. Is it free? Free.
Yeah.
Free.
The second thing in our sort of toolkit is we do media. So we create stories, we write little case studies, we write media posts, we try and earn some media or pay for media if we have to. So that's kind of our day-to-day, like our social media, we're constantly putting stuff out. The third thing is market research. We do a lot of market research every year on perceptions of New Zealand.
Yes.
So around the world, what are these countries thinking of New Zealand? How has that changed? What might that mean for us as a country and how we position ourselves? So that story I said earlier about having to show up in America looking a certain way, would that be quite different than the way you show up in South America?
Yep.
Or Australia or whatever. So that's the fourth thing is research. And fourth thing is we have a consultancy type area where some of my team are now getting really hands-on with certain sectors. So we're helping industry. So with a good example is in the technology sector, we launched the See Tomorrow First, which is like a brand campaign across the tech sector, in particular for technology.
Excellent copywriting, by the way.
It still draws from the New Zealand story, but it gives it a tech lens, and it's got some key messages and things like that. So we created that. And then the fifth thing we do is look after the fern mark, the silver fern trademark for New Zealand. Hugely recognised, more recognised than any other symbol of New Zealand by a country mile.
Is it really?
Yeah. We measure these sorts of things, obsessive measurers. More than our flag, more than a picture of a Kiwi or a map or anything. And we license that to New Zealand businesses to put on their own products.
Yep.
Again, traditionally it's been very food and beverage focused, but in the last couple of years, a lot in the education sector, tech sector, manufacturing. Again, it's a symbol of New Zealand that people around the world go, oh, okay, I know where you're from.
Yeah.
So that's the tangible 5 things that we have in our suite.
It's interesting. We have a client. They do a lot of they work in the carbon fibre space, and there's a couple of areas where they have their own sort of IP that's turned into product that they were looking to put the fern mark on.
Yeah.
And actually. To your credit, there was one particular area they were working in carbon fibre wrapped rifle barrels. And actually it was like,
we probably wouldn't
cool
have done
product,
that.
but sorry, that's not going to help the image. And I actually really respect that.
I was just thinking, I hope my team, not in a bad way, but we just say, look, we want it to represent something. But we have got, for example, the fern mark going into space. Like it's on every piece of rocketry and stuff. We try and get the fern mark on there. Rocket Lab's using it. Kia Aeronautics, Aerospace, so, and then lots and lots and lots of products. I think it's something like 2 billion SKUs a year have the fulfillment on them now. Wow. Some ridiculous number.
The Rocket Lab, the Kia Aerospace. I mean, it's one of those examples of one of those niches that's just sort of coming out of left centre, like left of field, and it's just growing. I mean, that aerospace kind of area down in Christchurch is huge.
It's amazing.
Right?
And again, a little factoid for you: New Zealand is the 4th most prolific space nation. In terms of number of rockets, number of launches, we are the 4th most prolific.
So the US is in there.
US, UK, US, China, India, and then us.
Oh, okay.
Or Japan.
There are some countries that I'm glad aren't higher up the list.
Yeah. North Korea. No.
Your words, not mine.
No, it's quite incredible when you think about it. It's that New Zealand has this touch, and again, it's going back to your cultural thing, because you can sort of wow about the stats, but the reason those things exist is because the people that are here are pioneering, they're thinking laterally. This generation of business leaders that are around now are seeing the success that came the last generation, and they're eclipsing it. And then that'll happen again and again. So we're only seeing this massive growth and ambition.
So as someone who manages and shapes and nurtures the brand of New Zealand, it's obviously personal to you. So what makes you proudest to be a Kiwi?
I think the way our culture shows up, all the cultural elements we talked about so far, like our innovation, but also our Indigenous culture, our Māori culture, that is something of great value to the country as well. Again, we measure these sorts of things, and it's hard not to be crass about it because it's authentically the right thing to do, but actually is an asset, and so. I get really proud when I see New Zealand businesses starting to realise that actually they can lean into their New Zealandness, they can use te reo, and it doesn't put people off. If anything, it enhances. And the Indigenous thinking that comes from being from a country like ours is a big asset for us. Particularly more and more in the minds of consumers who are seeking for a different way of being. Consumers now are looking for sustainability, regenerative, long-term thinking. Well, that's exactly how ancient cultures thought. So it's just that we forgot about it for a couple of hundred years in the Industrial Revolution.
That really resonates with me. I mean, coming from the UK, where, I mean, let's face it, they're not always the most open-minded from people to people from overseas.
There's a reason you're living here.
There is a reason that I'm living here, but for me, it's always been one of those things that just astounds me about the place. Is that you can swap languages within the same sentence, and it makes sense to the people.
More and more all the time.
Yeah.
I think we're more and more, it's an interesting time in New Zealand at the moment because of this sort of reaction to some of the comments that the incoming government is making, and I'm not going to get political, but what I'm most interested in and emboldened by is the reaction to it, is the fact that actually 20 years ago you would have had a few people being quite worried about stuff. Now I think, again, the vast majority of New Zealanders are going, hang on, we actually really like this. It's actually us, and it's authentically us, and so it's a different reaction.
And I mean, that's from a facet, like, looking at it from an identity perspective. That's something that forms an identity. Being able to use words interchangeably and understand some of those, very, very deep running, almost spiritual ways of thinking. Which, like you said, when it translates then to why we do what we do. I mean, it's pretty deeply woven. It's pretty deeply ingrained.
I mean, again, maybe because I'm a brandy person and you are too, obviously, but you sort of brands are spiritual things in a weird way. And New Zealand, and as you say, Māori culture is quite a spiritual. If you ever learn te reo properly, you'll realise it's poetry and it's spirituality, and it's like a language, unlike, you can't just directly translate between the languages because it doesn't make sense. But when you understand it, you realise that there is this connection, embedded in the language is a way of thinking. And that's quite a powerful thing. So we try and capture that sort of thinking too in some of the work that we do.
I mean, when you look then at some of the brands that we would rank against, I'm guessing Apple's going to be pretty close in terms of value, like, certainly top 3.
There you go. Do you want another stat? There you go. We are right up there with Apple, Amazon, bigger than Microsoft, way bigger than McDonald's, and better for you, I like to say. But our brand value would be right up there with the world's leaders.
But what's interesting in that is that when you look at someone like Apple, there's a way of thinking there. It's not just a brand that's built upon technology. It's the why of that technology.
And some of it's quite ephemeral. It's quite hard to get your head around. But if you study brands, you'll understand it's a sort of a rigid adherence to a brand design methodology and ethos around customer centricity, and. So you do get those really, really strong brands that stand for a lot more and makes them much more resilient. As a brand, brands build slowly over time. You can definitely do things that damage your brand, but actually, if you're investing in the core of it, and you should always be investing, then, for us as New Zealand, our brand is much stronger than any given small or long, even major catastrophes or major wins. You see blips and nouns. So like during COVID, for example, our brand got a bump in all our international surveys. We went from sort of in the top 20 of the world to being in the top sort of teens. But it's now gone back to where it was. Not in a bad way. It's just that's where we'll sit and we'll slowly grow it.
I mean, that's the nature of brand, right? Build it in the long run. So, producer Louis just given me the flag that says, we're nearly there on time.
I thought he was waving because he's enjoying it so much. He's going to keep going. We've got 4 hours of tape. Just use it all.
Lucky we bought the big hard drive. So where would you like to see New Zealand, and let's say New Zealand business to business, because that's our space,
Yeah.
where would you like to see that go in the next 10 years, both from the community sense, what are people within the community doing, and then on the broader scale, what is it achieving?
Yeah, one of the things I'm become really interested in my time at NZTE and now New Zealand Story, I've been in 15 years, I've been in the government system, but I still think of myself as a private sector guy.
You're still smiling, by the way.
I still smile, I know. And I do stuff in the private sector. I chair the Ice House and other things like this to keep myself private sector oriented. One of the things that we need to be thinking about constantly is that New Zealand, being a country of 6 million people exporting to the world, if every individual company tries to do it by themselves, it's very, very difficult. Like, it's a big world out there. So having some sort of collective mindset of whether you align around a brand or a sector or, you know, a market, I don't really mind, but work with others.
Yep.
And when I do get frustrated at times, it's because I see New Zealand businesses kind of missing the opportunity to collaborate.
Stop picking up a white piece of paper and writing on it from scratch. Like, somebody's already done that.
Yeah. And I'm lucky also to see the companies that are really good at it. Like, we're doing a piece of work at the moment with some of the top New Zealand brands where we're saying you're nothing to do with each other. You know, one of you is a food company, one is a tech company, travel, whatever. But you share a perspective on the world, and you can share research information and knowledge on the market, and suddenly just leapfrog everybody.
Yep.
So that's quite good when we see that really happening.
Yeah. So that you'd say that's a pretty key.
I think it's a big opportunity for us if we want to grow. I mean, New Zealand's got a real challenge when it comes to our productivity, when it comes to our international earnings. We're stubbornly set at a very low level, and we need to be able to do better. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean work harder; it means work smarter. And so, working smarter means collaborating, learning from others, leapfrogging them, not trying to do it all by yourself. So I think that's our opportunity. Yeah.
So as a final thought, then, if you had one ask of our audience, what would you ask? What would that be?
I think it would be great. I mean, again, goes back to the point of collaboration. We have structures and set up, and hopefully they're well thought through around how you can leverage the brand of New Zealand. So lean into the New Zealand Story or the See Tomorrow First campaign or whatever the right thing is that allows you to kind of immediately get a leg up.
Yep.
And then when you see an opportunity to improve it or build on it, you know, let us know. We always want to keep learning and building. But it is, go to our website, download some of our tools, read our research reports, that kind of stuff would be great.
Engage.
Invest
Some
exactly
time.
Right. You're a taxpayer, you paid for it, you might as well use it.
And on that note, we'll call it a day. Thank you so much for joining. It was a really interesting conversation.
Carpe.
Really appreciate it.